My name is Eleanor. I'm 70 years old. I suppose some people would call that elderly. But in my head, I'm still the woman who used to ride her bicycle to the library every morning, hair pinned up, shoes squeaking in the dew. I still remember what it felt like to laugh so hard over burnt pancakes that tears ran into my coffee. I still remember Robert's hand, warm in mine, and the tiny fingers of our son curled around just one of ours. Time doesn't take those things from you. Not really. They just get quieter. I've been alone for a long time now. My husband passed away 15 years ago. It was a Tuesday in early October. The sky was a soft, endless gray, and there was a single yellow leaf stuck to the windshield of his car. Funny what the brain holds on to. We were married for 32 years. We had our fights, of course, over finances, over my habit of folding fitted sheets the wrong way, over how often he left crumbs in the butter. But Robert was solid, quiet but present. He believed in showing love through actions, not speeches. The oil in my car was always changed. The snow was always shoveled before I even woke up. And when Michael was born, Robert cried. Not loudly, just one tear. He tried to hide it, but I saw it. I never forgot. Michael was our miracle. We had struggled to have a child for so long. Doctors, tests, whispered prayers in the dark. And then, one spring morning, he was there, red-faced, loud-lunged, perfect. I remember holding him for the first time and thinking, everything I have, everything I am, is yours now. And I meant it. I gave him everything, not just the food and the clothes and the little toy trains. I gave him my energy, my thoughts, my identity. I was Michael's mom long before I was Eleanor. I made every birthday cake from scratch, even the years when money was tight. I stayed up with him through chicken pox, broken hearts, and failed exams. I read him stories until he memorized them. Then I let him read them to me. When Robert died, Michael was already in college. I didn't tell him how hard it was to sit in that empty kitchen. I didn't tell him that I sometimes left the hallway light on just so I could pretend someone else was coming home. He had his life to build. I didn't want to weigh him down. And he tried. He called. He visited during holidays. When he got his first job, an assistant in a tech company, doing something with software I didn't quite understand, he took me out for lunch to celebrate. He even paid, though I saw him flinch when the bill came. And then came her, Anna. She was polite the first time we met. Too polite, the kind of polite that feels like a performance. She didn't sit long, said she had to meet a friend, but she thanked me for dinner and called me Mrs. Clark, even after I told her to call me Eleanor. I remember watching her walk out the door, heels clicking, perfume lingering in the air, and I had a strange feeling in my stomach. Not dislike, not yet, just a distance. Like I'd been gently told, this is where your place ends. But Michael was smitten. She was sharp, driven, full of plans. She had vision boards and color-coded calendars and a list of wedding venues before he'd even proposed. And when he did propose, on a chilly December evening under a streetlight, he called me the next morning with so much joy in his voice, I thought my heart might break from pride. They got married in spring. It was a small ceremony, elegant, white roses, a violinist. Anna's family were all there, her father loud and charming, her mother quiet and observant. I sat in the front row in a pale blue dress I bought for the occasion. Michael looked so handsome, nervous but handsome. And as he walked past me, he stopped and kissed the top of my head. He whispered, I love you, Mom. That was the last time I felt like I had a seat in the front row of his life. Still, I smiled for every photo. I danced when they asked me to. I hugged Anna's mother and told her how happy I was. And I meant it. At least, I tried to mean it. because Michael deserved happiness, and I was willing to do anything to give it to him, even when it meant letting go of everything I had, even when it meant selling the apartment where I had spent the last 30 years of my life, even when it meant moving in with them. Just for a little while, they said, while they got settled into their new home. I didn't realize then that the word home would soon stop applying to me. But I'll tell you everything. I'll tell you how a mother ends up in the basement of the house she paid for, knocking before entering her own kitchen. I'll tell you what happens when silence grows louder than love, and how, even at 70, it's not too late to remember who you are and take it all back. But that part comes later. For now, I just want you to know my name. I'm Eleanor, and this is the beginning of what they never thought I'd write down. After the wedding, they rented a small two-bedroom apartment in the city. It wasn't ideal. Michael had a long commute, and Anna said the walls were too thin. But they were newlyweds, and every inconvenience seemed like part of the adventure. I visited once, shortly after they moved in. I brought a casserole and a new set of towels. Anna smiled, said thank you, then folded the towels again when she thought I wasn't looking. She said the casserole was a bit rich for dinner and put it in the freezer. Michael barely noticed. He was distracted with something on his laptop. Still, they were happy. That's what I told myself, and I was happy for them. That's what I said out loud. A few months later, they came to see me in my apartment, the one Robert and I had bought together 30 years ago. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. Every dent in the wall had a story. The dining table still had a scorch mark from Michael's 7th birthday when the candle toppled over. My late husband's favorite chair, still a little lopsided, sat in the corner. I hadn't changed a thing. They sat on the couch, side by side, hands clasped tightly. And I knew, even before they said a word, that they were about to ask me for something. Michael cleared his throat. Mom, we've been looking at houses. I nodded. That's wonderful. But houses outside the city are expensive. And, well, Anna and I talked and we thought maybe we could all live together for a while. A bigger place. For the future, I remember blinking. Live together? I repeated. You mean like a shared home, Anna said, her voice smooth. Multi-generational. It's very common now. There's this beautiful place in Hillsmere. Quiet, safe, plenty of space. There's even a finished basement. Michael jumped in. It'd be temporary for you, Mom, just until you get settled somewhere else. Or, if you like it, who knows? He smiled like it was a gift, like they were offering me something precious. But I could feel it, a knot forming in my stomach. Still, I nodded, because what else does a mother do when her son looks at her with hope in his eyes? Later that week, they brought me the listings. They'd already narrowed it down. They already knew which one they wanted. It was lovely, high ceilings, big yard, a deck that looked out over a patch of woods. Anna said it was the perfect place to raise children. I asked about the finances, and that's when Michael looked uncomfortable. We'd need to sell your apartment, he said gently. It would give us enough for the down payment. You know, combine our resources. I remember looking at the walls around me, at the photos, the clock, the scratch marks on the floor from when Michael used to race his toy trucks. I swallowed hard. If it's for you, I said, then of course. And just like that, it was done. The paperwork, the sale, the move. I gave away most of the furniture. They said it wouldn't match the new place. I kept a few boxes of books, some clothes, a photo album, and Robert's old coat. Everything else was either sold, donated, or left behind. When I turned in the keys, I stood in the empty doorway for a long time. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. You're doing the right thing, I told myself. You're helping your family. When we arrived at the new house, Anna had everything organized. She walked me straight downstairs to the basement. Your space, she said with a tight smile. It was clean, spacious technically. A small bathroom, a sofa bed, a mini fridge. No windows, but a few bright lights. Michael brought down the last box and kissed my forehead. Thank you for doing this, Mom. Really, we'll make it work. And I believed him. For the first few weeks, it was fine. I unpacked slowly, arranged my books, made the bed each morning with hospital corners, the way Robert used to like it. I cooked dinner a few times, big, hearty meals, but Anna always seemed to already have something in the oven, something healthier or less salty. She thanked me, but she didn't eat what I made. Still, I told myself not to mind. It was a new rhythm, a new life. I was adjusting. We were all adjusting. Then came the small things. I tried to put a potted plant on the kitchen windowsill upstairs, just a little ivy in a blue ceramic pot. The next day, it was gone. I found it in the garage. No one mentioned it. I hung one of Robert's paintings in the downstairs hallway. Anna asked me later sweetly if I'd mind keeping the aesthetic cohesive. I asked for a spare key to the house. Michael said, "Of course," but it never appeared. I started knocking before coming upstairs, not because anyone told me to, but because I began to feel like a guest. No, not even a guest. A guest is welcomed. I was tolerated. Still, I smiled. I folded laundry when I saw it in the basket. I watched the kids when Anna had errands. I swept the back porch when no one else did. I never raised my voice, never made demands. I was grateful, I told myself. I had a roof over my head. I had my son. I had my grandchildren, even if they barely looked up from their tablets when I entered the room. Just until you get settled, Michael had said. But weeks turned into months, and I was still in the basement. I remember waking one night and realizing I didn't know where the light switches were upstairs. I didn't know what brand of coffee they liked. I didn't know what time they ate dinner anymore. I had become invisible, a shadow. But I told myself, it's okay. You're helping. This is what mothers do. I kept telling myself that until I no longer believed it. The first real rule came on a Tuesday. I was coming upstairs with a basket of clean laundry, Michael's socks, Anna's yoga leggings, the twins' tiny t-shirts. I didn't mind folding them. It gave me something to do, something that felt useful. I told myself that was still important. As I rounded the corner into the kitchen, Anna was on the phone. She didn't see me at first. She was pacing, barefoot, holding a glass of lemon water in one hand. She stopped when she saw me and pressed the phone to her chest. "Eleanor," she said almost kindly, "would you mind knocking next time before coming upstairs, just so we know you're here?" I blinked. "Oh, of course." I carried the laundry to the couch and sat down. Her voice floated back as she returned to her call, lighter now, like nothing had happened. That night, I knocked before coming up for tea. No one answered. I waited a minute. Then I went back downstairs and boiled water in the tiny kettle I kept next to my bed. That was the beginning. After that, the rules became clearer. Not in writing, not spoken formally, but in tone, in looks, in small corrections. No TV after 9 p.m. The volume is too loud, even with the door closed. No cooking upstairs. The smells linger and the kids are picky. No laundry after dinner. The machines make too much noise. Don't open the windows in the basement. You'll let in dust. There were no windows, but I didn't correct her. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and reached for a plate. Anna turned from the sink and said, "Those are our dishes. You have some downstairs, remember?" My hand froze in the air. I nodded slowly. "Of course, sorry." Michael was in the living room. He heard it. I know he did. But he didn't say a word. He never did. Not when the kids left their mess on the stairs and I cleaned it up. Not when Anna asked me not to attend her friend's baby shower. It's just for girls our age. Not when the twins called me her instead of grandma. Is she coming upstairs? Tell her I want juice. Their voices were small, high-pitched, dismissive. Children imitate what they hear, and I was becoming someone they barely heard. I started keeping a diary, not because I thought it would change anything, but because it was the only place I could still exist without tiptoeing. The first page was plain, just the date. Then, I knocked to come upstairs today. No one answered. I went back down and made soup in the microwave. Tasted like rubber, pretended it didn't matter. The next day, Anna said I shouldn't walk barefoot on the main floor. The kids had sensitive skin. I wore socks all day, slipped once, bruised my hip. Didn't mention it. The entries began to pile up. Michael forgot my birthday. I waited until dinner, thinking maybe there was a cake. There wasn't. Anna mentioned it offhand, then said, "Oh, that was today?" I asked if I could buy a bird feeder for the backyard. Anna said it would attract squirrels. I looked for the old photo of Robert and me from our honeymoon, the one in the red frame. It's gone. Each page was a quiet scream, each sentence a tiny rebellion. I tried to talk to Michael once. It was late. The kids were asleep. He was watching TV on the couch, his face lit blue by the screen. I sat beside him. "Michael, do you think I'm a burden?" He looked at me, surprised. "What? No, of course not." "Then why?" I hesitated. "Why do I feel like one?" He sighed, rubbed his eyes. "Mom, things are just busy. You know how it is. The kids, work, the house. I gave up my apartment," I said quietly. "That was my home." He frowned, defensive now. "And now we all have a home. Together." But it didn't feel like together. It felt like I was allowed to stay, so long as I was small, quiet, invisible. That night I wrote. He looked at me like I was being dramatic. But I'm not. I just miss hearing my name without a sigh attached to it. The worst part wasn't the rules. It wasn't the silence. It wasn't even the loneliness. It was the erosion, the slow sanding down of who I was. I used to teach children how to read. I used to run a book club. I used to have friends, neighbors, people who greeted me by name. Now I was a figure in the basement, a coat on a hook, a plate in a drawer no one used. Sometimes I caught my reflection in the tiny bathroom mirror and flinched, not because of age or wrinkles, but because I looked like someone else's memory. One evening, I left my diary open on the nightstand by mistake. When I returned from brushing my teeth, it was closed. I stared at it for a long time, and then I opened to the next page and wrote in capital letters, "If you're reading this, I know. I see you. I remember everything." I wasn't sure who I was writing it for, but I knew one thing: they might pretend I didn't exist, but I was still here, and one day I would stop pretending too. Some losses are sharp, like broken glass. Others are slow, like water soaking through a ceiling until the whole thing caves in. That week, it caved in. It started with the keys. One morning, I went to take my usual walk around the block. The doctor had told me to keep active. "Movement is memory," he said, tapping his temple with a smile. I used to enjoy those walks, the rustling trees, the scent of someone's laundry, the quiet chatter of dogs and early joggers. But when I reached for my keys in the bowl near the door, they weren't there. I looked twice, 3 times, checked my coat pocket. Nothing. I called upstairs. "Michael, have you seen my keys?" There was silence, then footsteps. Anna appeared at the top of the stairs, arms crossed loosely, half smiling in that way that never reached her eyes. "Oh," she said lightly. "Michael took them. We just thought, with the kids, you know, doors being left open and such. For safety." "For safety," I repeated. She nodded as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You don't really need them, do you? Just knock when you're back. Or text. We're always around. She walked away before I could answer. I didn't knock. I didn't walk. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at my slippers. I thought of all the times I had taught Michael to be responsible with his things. The time I walked 3 blocks to return a wallet he'd found in the park. We do the right thing, I'd told him, even if no one's watching. Now they were watching everything I did, and yet saw nothing. That evening, I sat alone in the basement as the sounds of laughter and clinking dishes floated down through the floorboards. Dinner? I hadn't been called. I waited, told myself maybe they were just running late. Maybe Anna was stressed. Maybe the twins were fussy. Then I heard Michael's voice, "Save the last slice of quiche for me." And Anna's laugh, "As if you'll get to it before Caleb does." The clatter of forks. No one came to fetch me. No one knocked on my door. I waited another 10 minutes, then 20. Then I heated up the leftover soup I had in a plastic container, something I'd made days ago. It tasted like paste. I sat in silence and imagined their dinner upstairs. Warm bread, the hum of voices, the twins throwing peas at each other. My family. I wasn't hungry, not really. I was grieving something I couldn't name. After dinner, I climbed the stairs slowly, not to join them, just to return the basket of clean towels. Anna was tidying up, and Michael was putting the boys to bed. She looked up from the counter. "Oh, hey, I meant to bring those down." I placed the towels on a stool. "Is everything all right?" "Of course," she said, still not looking at me. "Just keeping things smooth. You know, routines help the kids." Routines. I had been part of their routine. Breakfasts, walks, reading stories, washing sippy cups, folding clothes. But somewhere along the line, I had been erased, gently, quietly. It wasn't malice. That might have been easier to fight. It was something colder, indifference dressed in politeness. And Michael, my son, my only child, was disappearing into it. The next day, I heard Anna on the phone again. She always spoke too loudly when she thought I wasn't around. "No, she doesn't come up much anymore. It's better this way, less disruption." She paused. "I know, but she's not. She doesn't decide anything now. It's all in our name anyway." I didn't move. I stood in the stairwell like a statue, the wall pressing into my shoulder. All in our name. I thought back to the notary's office. How I'd sat beside them smiling, my hands shaking slightly as I signed the sale papers for my apartment. Michael had squeezed my fingers under the table. "Are you sure, Mom?" he had asked, but his eyes were hopeful. I was sure. Of course I was sure. I wanted them to have a real future. I wanted them to be comfortable. I had told myself, this is love. This is what love does. It gives. But now, that same love was being folded, packed, and stored somewhere out of reach. That evening, I took out the worn leather album from my suitcase, the one with the photos of Robert and me, the honeymoon in Quebec, Michael at age 5 in a cowboy costume, me in my classroom, arms crossed, chalk dust on my sweater. I turned the pages slowly, brushing the corners with my thumb. Then I reached the back pocket. A folded letter, faded and brittle, Robert's handwriting, always in blue ink, slanted forward, precise. "L, if something ever happens to me, I want you to remember, you are not just someone's mother or wife. You are a whole world. Don't let anyone shrink you. Love you always, Robert." My breath caught. It had been almost 12 years since the accident. I still dreamed of him, still reached for his side of the bed sometimes. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. That night, I made a decision. I would stop pretending I was invisible. They may have taken my place at the table. They may have silenced my name in this house. But they would not erase my story. Not completely. Not while I still remembered who I was. Not while I still had my pen. and not while I still had something, someone, worth fighting for. The morning light was weak, filtering through the small basement window like a pale promise. I woke with a heaviness I'd come to know too well, a weight pressing down on my chest, thick as the curtains I'd drawn the night before. Michael was out early, as usual, and Anna was bustling upstairs, her voice humming faintly through the floorboards. I sat at the small wooden table, my diary open before me. I traced my pen across the page, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, my mind kept circling back to the letter from Robert, to his words that had burned bright in my heart for days. You are a whole world. Don't let anyone shrink you. But how do you hold on to yourself when the world you built is crumbling? I decided to go through the old files I had brought from my apartment before selling it. I kept them hidden in a drawer. Contracts, bank statements, and some legal documents I hadn't yet unpacked. I fumbled through the envelopes until I found the one marked house purchase papers, the contract for the big house outside the city. Michael had insisted I keep a copy. I slid the papers onto the table, flattened them out. At first glance, everything looked normal. The signatures, dates, the official stamps. But then, tucked beneath, I found something else. A letter from the lawyer who had overseen the sale. It was addressed to me. Or rather, it should have been. Instead, it was addressed to Anna. Confused, I read on. The letter explained that during the transaction, the ownership of my old apartment had been transferred, not to Michael, but to Anna, my daughter-in-law. My heart seized. I reread the lines, searching for a mistake. Number. It was deliberate. My home, the place I had lived in for over 30 years, that I had worked and saved for, was now legally hers. I sat back, my hands trembling. How could this be? Had I not been present? Had I not signed everything? Or had I been tricked? The thought made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. I needed answers. Later that day, I mustered the courage to ask Michael directly. We were alone in the kitchen, the twins playing upstairs. Michael, why is my apartment in Anna's name? He looked up, startled. Then down. He didn't answer immediately. I thought it would be easier this way, he said finally, voice low. For taxes and the bank. It's just paperwork, Mom. You still have your place here. Not really, I whispered. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. I didn't want to upset you. You said you trusted me. I nodded, but my throat was tight. Did you think about how it feels to lose my home twice? He didn't say anything. Later, alone again, I flipped through the diary pages filled with my quiet thoughts, my growing fears. I realized I was no longer just living in their house. I was living in the shadow of their decisions. The basement was my cage, but cages can be broken. The next day, I reached out to an old friend from my teaching days, Margaret. She was a lawyer now. I barely recognized her voice after all these years, but it was warm and strong. When I told her my story, she listened without interruption. Then she said softly, Eleanor, you've been through a lot, but it's not too late. We can fight this. For the first time in months, a flicker of hope stirred inside me. Maybe I could reclaim not just a house, but my dignity. Maybe I could teach them, Michael, Anna, everyone, that a mother is not a ghost. She is a force. And she is home. The next morning, the basement felt colder than usual. The stale air wrapped around me like a reminder that I was still trapped. A guest without a welcome, a mother without a home. But beneath the surface, a fire was kindling. I sat at the tiny table beneath the bare bulb, my diary open again. The pages were filled with scribbles, small victories, dark thoughts, questions that kept me awake. Am I being selfish, demanding too much? But deep down, I knew this was about respect, about justice, about reclaiming my life. That afternoon, I called Margaret again. Her voice was calm and reassuring. "We'll start with the paperwork," she said. "I'll need copies of everything: the sale contract, any letters, your diary if you want." I hesitated, then decided to send it all. Writing the diary was my therapy, my truth. I wanted her to understand not only the legal facts, but the heart behind them. Margaret suggested we request a full review of the sale, including the ownership transfer. She explained that sometimes these transactions could be challenged if coercion or misinformation was proven. A part of me trembled at the thought of fighting my own son in court. But another part, the part that had raised Michael on her own after his father died, stood taller than ever. She reminded me to document everything: the rules imposed on me, the times I was excluded from family events, the humiliations I endured. It felt strange, almost humiliating, to keep a record of my own suffering. But if it could help me win, it was worth it. Days passed. Anna's presence upstairs grew more oppressive. She no longer bothered to hide the disdain in her voice when she spoke down to me. One evening, as I shuffled down the narrow basement stairs, I heard her laughing with the twins, but it wasn't the warm laughter of a family. It was mocking, sharp. I slowed my steps, hiding behind the wall. "I swear the old lady thinks she still owns this place," Anna whispered to Michael. He nodded, but didn't answer. That silence cut deeper than any words. I felt small and invisible. But the next morning, I found a letter taped to my basement door. It was from Margaret. "The first hearing is set for next month. Stay strong, Eleanor." I folded the paper carefully, clutching it like a lifeline. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope. The house that had become a prison might soon be the battlefield where I fought back. That night, I wrote in my diary, "I may be living in the basement, but my spirit is climbing stairs no one can block." And as I wrote, I realized something. This fight wasn't just about a house, it was about being seen, being heard, being loved, or at least respected, and I was not done yet. The day of the hearing arrived slowly, like a long shadow stretching across my life. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple navy blue blouse. The one Robert once said made me look like I could conquer the world. Margaret met me outside the courthouse with a firm handshake and a warm smile. "You're ready," she said, "and so am I." Inside, the room was cold and sterile. Michael sat on the other side with Anna, looking uncomfortable but silent. I felt my heart pound, but I reminded myself of every step I had taken to get here. Every page of my diary, every call to Margaret, every lonely night in the basement. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. I told the judge my story, not just the legal facts, but the pain. How I had sold my home to give my son and his family a better life. How I was welcomed with kindness only at first. How, gradually, I was pushed aside, shut down, made invisible. How the house I helped buy was no longer my home. I shared the letters from Robert, the diary entries, the legal documents. The judge listened quietly, nodding. Michael's face was unreadable. When Margaret presented the evidence, it became clear that the transfer of my old apartment to Anna's name was done without my full understanding. There had been coercion, deliberate omission. It was unfair. The judge ruled in my favor. The ownership of the apartment was restored to me. And the big house? The court recognized my financial contribution and granted me legal rights to the property. Most importantly, I was no longer confined to the basement. I was part of the home again. The following weeks were not easy. There was tension, cold silences, but I stood my ground. Michael avoided me at first, but slowly the old son I knew, the boy I raised, began to reappear. One afternoon, he knocked on the basement door. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly. "I didn't realize. I was wrong." I nodded, eyes brimming. Thank you for saying that. As the months passed, the house grew warmer. Anna still tried to control the space, but I no longer feared her. The twins started to smile when I joined them for dinner, not just because it was polite, but because I was their grandmother. One evening, I sat by the fireplace, the soft glow illuminating my face. I opened my diary and wrote one final entry. Now I'm home again, not because of walls or floors, but because I chose to stand up, because I remembered who I am, a woman, a mother, a force, and no basement can hold that back. The kettle boiled freely, the TV played after 9, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace.